Jean-Claude, maybe you'd like to elaborate a little bit on it, because apparently Trump has brought a lot of loyalists, or people he thinks in government will please the voters, people they know, they see on TV. It's a little bit like the Muppet Show, Dr. Oz, whoever. Well, it's a little crazy. Then he names SARS that he feels are important for certain missions. But as you mentioned, not everybody is prepared for that task. So what do you think of this mix of bringing in loyalists that you feel that they're not going to stop you, but not very experienced people, and you're going to make the whole world crazy because it's, as you said, it's going to be really hard to know who to reach and who to talk to. So what do you think of that kind of management, and why do you think Trump is doing it that way? Jean-Claude, since you know politics.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks to Thierry, thanks to Song Nim for inviting me again. This is the third time, I guess, I'm speaking of Trump and the change of administration. I'm not going to repeat some of the things that have been said by the other members of the panels. They're all very relevant, and I subscribe to a large extent to what has been said. I'm trying to sort of present a different perspective. I've been in the US since, on and off, since 1987. I came as a documented immigrant, I like to say. I became an American citizen, and I was involved in American politics, but I would say at the ground level, from almost the very beginning, the campaign for the election of Bush father, Bush 41 in 1988. So I've seen the sort of the Republican Party and the game at the local level in New York, to a lesser extent in Washington, because I've been involved with a number of think tanks. So I will make a number of comments and not necessarily spend a lot of time commenting, but I'd be happy to take in the Q&A session some of the points that are more relevant for your own personal interest. Trump is transactional, controversial, consequential, very supportive of himself. If you ask me what's Trump's main interest, that's Donald J. Trump. Then the next interest is probably his family. The third interest is his business, and then the rest come afterwards. So that's the first consideration. You might say, during the first administration, he was not prepared to be elected, and essentially what he did, he worked with the Republican Party. And there were a lot of chaos, and things didn't turn out, and there was a lot of people were replaced, didn't stay long. Very typical, his first chief of staff when he was elected in 2016 was the head of the RNC, Reince Priebus. So he really led the Republican Party to a large extent, drive the show for him, and he surrounded himself with people he was not familiar with. This time is completely different. Trump 2024 is going to be loyalty first and foremost. And that explains some of the comments that were made earlier on. I mean, he's not necessarily recruiting people who are very experienced in the public sector, in securities, or I'm not saying they are not competent, but they are people who have not held that type of responsibility before. I concur completely with what you said, but I'm not going to repeat it, but you're absolutely correct on that. So that's going to be very different. Small anecdote, I think if you want to understand what he's going to do, you have to understand that the Trump who's going to be the 47th president of the United States is not different from the Trump who was in business. He's acting exactly the same way. My first encounter, not with Trump personally, but with his organization, was in the early 90s in New York. Some of you who are familiar with the United States may remember a company that was called Eastern. Eastern was running a shuttle between Washington, Boston, and New York, and Eastern went bankrupt. Trump tried to buy Eastern, and as a banker, I was asked to fund the operation. I looked at the financials, I decided not to do it. So I had an opportunity to meet Trump because I said no to the loan. I didn't meet him at that time. But that's not important. The other thing is his relation to politics. He's always been involved in politics, but he was an independent, he was a Democrat, probably for a longer period of time, and he was a Republican. He was twice a Republican, and then he became an independent. I mean, it was very, but he was contributing to some politicians. And many of the politicians that he criticized afterwards were people that he funded when he was in business. I give you this is an anecdote, but I got it from the person that he was dealing with it. Some of you may know or heard of the last Republican governor in New York was George Pataki. George Pataki was elected in 1995, had 3 mandates of 4 years. He stayed until 2006. He had never met Trump, but I got it from him. He told me that one day, just after he was elected for the first time, he got a phone call. Hi, this is Donald J. Trump. Governor, congratulations, I'm happy to see you've been elected. Did you get my check? And Pataki said, well, I mean, thanks for your congratulations, I appreciate it. I don't think I've received a check from you. He says, that's impossible, I send it, I'm gonna find my secretary, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, next thing, a day later, he got a check which was antedated for $20,000. That's just an anecdote.
Yeah, but it's a funny
Now,
one, though.
in terms of people who's been nominated, let me say 2 or 3 things. One, he's not expecting that every nominee is going to be appointed by the Senate. The Constitution in the United States says that the Senate has a role to advise and consent. And the person that he chooses to be the Attorney General, which is the Minister of Justice in the United States, was actually not supported. He did a number of things. He was heavily criticized. In particular, you remember, we had Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House, coming and speaking to us a couple of days ago. Matt Gaetz was responsible to a large extent for McCarthy being kicked out of his position. Now, Trump is not stupid. He has many flaws, but he's far from being stupid. I mean, don't consider him to be mentally deficient or anything. He's a smart guy, but he not necessarily, I would say, the ethics of everybody. I try to be neutral and diplomatic. So what's happening? He realized that he wouldn't get the Senate to confirm Gaetz. What he did, he chose somebody else. But he chose somebody who was the former Attorney General in Florida. So look at the origin. Instead of saying what they've done, what are their competence, level of competence, look at where they're coming from. In the nominees of this new administration that's going to come to power in January this year, you have a number of New Yorkers, and you have a number of people from Florida. And you notice that when he stepped down in 2020, when he was not re-elected, he moved to Florida. So, I mean, he surrounds himself, again, with people he knows. That's the criteria. I could say more, but I probably stop for the time being.
So, yeah.